I'm going to act as the moderator. Unfortunately, the moderator that is on the program, Carol Mason, couldn't make it because her plane was delayed or flight canceled or something like that due to weather. So let me introduce the panelists, and then I'm going to introduce myself, and then we'll take it from there. So we have three presenters, Amina, Benalioulhaj. I'm ready for you.
It's okay.
She actually was my student a couple years ago. She will graduate this spring from the University of Oklahoma with a bachelor's degree in Women and Gender Studies and a minor in African American Studies. She's the producer, director, and editor of Women Behind Bars, the Voices of Oklahoma's Incarcerated Women and Their Children. Amina began shooting this documentary as part of a coursework for an internship with the Women's and Gender Studies Department at the University of Oklahoma. Dr. Zermarie Deacon researches cross-cultural interpretations of health and encouragement of health and well-being in diverse communities. She's particularly interested in factors that support wellness in the face of significant adversity. She has prior experience with 3 Photo Voice projects. And Melissa Moore currently serves as field consultant with the South Carolina Access Initiative, where she works to expand access to comprehensive reproductive health services in the state. She's also the program, excuse me?
South Carolina.
What did I say?
I didn't include it in there, but South Carolina.
Oh, okay. She's also the program director for We Are Family, where she advances youth leadership development projects and support services for gay, lesbian, bisexual, queer, questioning, asexual, and intersex youth. She has worked towards building a more inclusive South Carolina through her work as executive assistant with Alliance for Full Acceptance and field director with South Carolina Equality. So 3 very interesting presenters. My name is Clemencia Rodriguez. I'm a professor in the Department of Communication here at the University of Oklahoma. And this is exactly my field. I've been doing work on media for social movements, community media, alternative media, citizens media since I was like 20 years old. So it's been a long time. And I just want to kind of introduce a few pointers to set this discussion going. So when we think about media for social change, I think it can be a really tricky question, and it's a really tricky issue. And the reason I call it tricky is because media can trick us into thinking that that's where social change is going to happen, and that's how all of social change is going to happen. And one of the things I've learned is that if you allow media to take over social change initiatives, it's not going to happen. You always have to bring back human agency and human subjectivity and human action into whatever you're thinking when you're dealing with media. But because media are so powerful, they can suck all the energy out of a social movement or out of any kind of activist initiative. The other thing that I think I've learned in all of my years doing this kind of work is that media moments have to be hyper-designed. I think the times and initiatives and instances where media actually facilitate social change or end up in the social change that we want are moments where the communicators behind the media initiative hyper-design everything about the medium. They hyper-design how the medium is going to be produced, what type of technologies are going to be used, how people are going to interact with the technologies, and they also hyper-design the moment of reception of the medium, of the messages. In many cases, I see how the moment of production is taken care of, but not the moment of reception. So we produce all kinds of media products, or activists and social movements produce all kinds of media products and kind of throw them out there, and they don't do anything in terms of how people are going to receive those media products or those media messages. There's incredible, amazing experiences throughout our recent history that are becoming kind of the classic cases of media for social change, especially social media. For example, there's the case a few years ago in the Philippines where President Estrada was ousted, and all the entire mobilization, it was the first time that people were mobilized through text, cellular telephony and text messaging. And so this is, there's even a mural in Manila that commemorates this revolution where President Estrada was ousted and another president came in, and it's called the cell phone revolution. And there's a mural where actually you see people, instead of, you know, the typical revolutions with guns or whatever, you have these people with cell phones, with their cell phones. The other case that is becoming really kind of a classic in the field is the case in Korea, where the traditional political parties had overtaken all the media, and there was a young candidate for the presidency that couldn't have any access to media because the media were allowing only the traditional candidates to have access. And so through blogging and web pages and again text messaging and cellular telephony, young voters that were not even going to vote because they were totally disillusioned with the political system and the political parties were kind of inspired to go vote for this political candidate. And when you see what happened in terms of media creating social change, it was amazing because all the election was going towards one of the traditional political candidates until less than 24 hours before the election was over. And then at the very last minute, these masses of young voters that were not going to vote, had never voted in their lives, went to the polls, and actually this alternative candidate was elected. And last but not least, of course, we all know about the Arab Spring. The Arab Spring now is known, has made it to, you know, the first time. Usually, it's not the first time, as I'm telling you now. I mean, there's been other cases before the Arab Spring, but the Arab Spring has been so loud in the media that now everyone thinks that that's the first time that social media were used to mobilize people. All those are cases of good social change, but I'm thinking of a recent case where there was a massive demonstration in Colombia, and actually the Colombian diaspora joined this demonstration against kidnapping, which had kind of an undercurrent of a demonstration against the leftist guerrilla. So, you know, in the country of Colombia, there's kidnapping that happens on the part of the right-wing militias and on the side of the left-wing guerrillas. And this demonstration was talking only about the leftist guerrillas. And there was clearly a kind of a class angle to this demonstration. In other words, only Colombians who had access to computers and who had access to internet connections were participating in this. But to the rest of the world, it looked like all Colombians were united in this. And so, you know, it's one of those cases where one, because of these apparently democratic access of that social media allows everyone to participate, you may think that something is popular and democratic, but you have to really look beyond the surface, because it may not. It may be that only certain people who have access to the technologies are participating and making it look like if it was totally, entirely democratic. I'm just going to leave those kind of pointers there for us to start thinking about the topic. I'm going to give the words to our first presenters. They're going to talk for about 10 minutes each, and then we're just going to turn this into a dialogue. So, Zermarie, if you want to start.
Do you want me to go there?
Whatever you want.
Is it okay with people if I sit? Can you see? Okay. It's simple. Okay, so I'm going to actually talk about a little bit more about low-tech method for social change. I'm going to talk about photo voice. Has anybody ever heard of photo voice before? Okay, I have a couple of hands. Where did you hear about it?
Qualitative methods class.
Okay, wonderful. So photo voice is becoming very, very popular. When I first became involved with the photo voice project, it was in its nascency as a very popular method, but it's now become much more popular, and it's sometimes used outside of university context. But the context that I'm familiar with it is as a community-based participatory action research, which what that means basically is that you have researchers from, say, university partnering with community members, and that could be any kind of community that's in some sort of need of change or has some sort of question or some sort of issue they would like to address, and working with them, allowing the community members to inform any kind of work and identify the issues that they want to work on. And so the photo voice projects that I've worked on have all been around that kind of issue. So I'm going to give you just an introduction to the method, but just as an example. So the first one that I was involved with as a graduate student was in Battle Creek, and the idea was the very impoverished neighborhoods, and they were working with the Kellogg Foundation, and they wanted to create social change. And the foundation was able to use this method to better understand the needs of these communities. You know, there's a lot of drugs, gangs, violence, and you know what was important to members of these communities in terms of how they wanted to create change within their context. Last year, I had the privilege of being part of a project here in Norman, working with adolescent girls, looking at their perceptions of their own health and their community's health, to collaborating with a local organization, Full Center for Children and Families, looking at how we could better respond to these girls and improve health outcomes for them, and socially and physically in the long term. And then now I'm working with the Chickasaw Nation, looking at elders, looking at disenfranchised elders who are not getting services and are disadvantaged in terms of health care delivery, and looking at how we can improve health access to them. So as you can see, a very, very diverse method that can be applied in very many contexts. It's often used with kids. The beauty of it is that it uses photography. So it's very, very low tech. You can use disposable cameras, you can use digital cameras, you can use any number of methods, but it's very, very low tech, and it requires relatively few skills on the part of participants. What you do, basically, the idea of the method is you work with the community around identifying questions that they would like to address. So whether those be questions around health, whether those be questions around economic disparities, whether those be questions around whatever is interesting to them, and you then provide them with training, very basic training around photography and some basic training around the method, which has some ethical issues associated with it that I can go into later if people have questions. And you give them cameras, and they take pictures around questions. So, and these are called framing questions, and they're usually very basic questions, things like, what's good about your community? What would you like to change? What obstacles are there to making improvements in whatever area it is that you want to make? And then people come together, and different projects vary in terms of how often they come together or how they do this. But usually maybe in small groups they'll come together with their photographs that they've taken in response to this question. So as you can see, that would work very, very well maybe for a community where literacy is low, maybe people aren't as verbal, don't have as much comfort expressing themselves verbally. They can take a picture to give an answer to their question. Works very well with younger people as well, because maybe they can't verbalize some of the issues that they're facing, but they can take a photograph. It's also been used very commonly with immigrant communities, refugee communities, or in other countries with the first person who actually did it. I'm sorry, I totally should have introduced her first. Carolyn Wang actually worked in China with women who were rural women who had health access problems. It was a public health method for her, and who maybe were never listened to before, maybe didn't have a way to express some of the issues that they were facing, but through photography, they were able to do that. So people can take photographs of the issues that they face, and then they can use those photographs to tell the story. And the beauty of the photographs is that when people can then come together in their groups, the photographs spark discussion. I took a photograph of something that was an issue for me, and then you say, oh yeah, that's also something that I face. And then through those meetings, through those group discussions, you build this narrative of what is the issue that's facing. So Carolyn Wang, who was actually the person who first developed this method, very powerful example of that was in China, where a woman took a picture of a baby next to a field while the mother was working in the field, and the baby was lying unattended next to the field. And this was a very powerful image that sort of depicted the lack of childcare access, women's limited options in terms of how they were able to take care of their children, still having to engage in hard labor while their children were unattended, uncared for. And this sparked a significant discussion amongst other women who also had this issue, maybe didn't know how to verbalize it, didn't even know this was a concern, didn't even realize that this was an area where they would like change. And through this, kind of created awareness of this issue. So the photographs are very powerful, and then through that discussion, that weekly discussion through the groups, you build a story of what is going on in this community, what would we like to change, how can we change that? And the additional beauty of it is that through that process, the participants then develop skills as change agents. They learn to think critically about their communities. They learn to think critically about the issues that they're facing. They start developing their own confidence as social change agents. And so they not only identify issues in their community, but they also develop their own skill sets, their own ability to be confident change agents, and their own ability to look at a social change problem and identify it and think about ways to resolve it. Because often these projects will then include participants in a discussion about how to solve the problems that they're identifying. And then it will end, usually in most cases, with an exhibit. And participants will be part of this exhibit. So again, it can be very low tech. It doesn't have to cost a lot of money. Pictures can be mounted on a phone board and put up alongside maybe some quotations that have come from this narrative discussion groups. And so it can be very high tech if you have the resources, but it can also be very low tech. And these exhibits can be very, very powerful. We actually had one here last year in the social work department. And so people will be invited, and you can invite policymakers. We had the mayor here last year to come look at the girls' pictures. And so you can invite policymakers, you can invite anybody that you want. And the idea is to then allow people to come see these photographs and read the narratives associated with them. And through that, you can tell a story sometimes. We'll go for a picture is worth 1,000 words or whatever. But you can tell a story that's a lot more powerful than maybe hearing somebody speak. Or you can allow people who may not know how to express what they really feel or really is a concern for them because they may lack resources and opportunities and not be comfortable with verbal expression, but can really powerfully demonstrate what they wanted to say with a photograph. And it can be incredibly powerful as a method for creating awareness of issues and then serving as a catalyst for change. And so you ideally will target people at that higher echelons of society. Maybe you have some policymakers attending. Maybe you have some people with some resources to create change attending. They get to see this method. But then also the participants become more critical thinkers about their own communities and more willing maybe to participate, I think hopefully more confident in their own skills as social change agents. We actually did, in the Battle Creek project, we actually did interviews with participants. And across the board, they felt more empowered, they felt more able to be change agents, they were more willing to become involved in community change projects in their community as a result of having to participate in this project, having to go out and think about their community and speak to other people, and they developed a sense of confidence in themselves. So even though it's a very low-tech method, and then obviously if you do it as a university, you'll do like your qualitative analysis, like you said, and you'll analyze it and you'll publish it, and all that kind of good stuff. But it also has this community component. And these exhibits sometimes become traveling exhibits that can be put up in locations, in where you have people coming through that can see these photographs. And it's used very, very, very commonly nowadays because it's such a low tech. It's a very powerful method. And so I can elaborate more later if people have questions about particular projects, but I wanted to give you an overview of the method as a whole, and it's a beautiful thing. So I won't take up too much more time from any other presenters, but I can answer more questions later if people would like to know more about it.
Thank you. Excellent. I think this is a perfect segue into my topic. My name is Amina, and I directed, produced, and edited a film on female incarceration in Oklahoma. It took me about 2 years. I am still working on graduating from the Women's and Gender Studies program at OU, but I'll be done this May. And the Photo Voice project relates to my particular project in a very direct way. I took a course at the Oklahoma Summer Arts Institute about 7 years ago, right after I graduated from high school, with Ross Kaufman, director of Born into Brothels, an Academy Award-winning documentary film about children in the streets of Calcutta, children of the prostitutes that lived in Calcutta, and they did a similar photo voice project and raised money for themselves and were able to get out of the brothels and go to school overseas, and some of them even went to film school and ended up making movies themselves. But I took a 2-week course with him, and I was really inspired by what he taught me about documentary filmmaking. And one of the things that he told me was, you don't have to go to film school to make a documentary film. You can do it right now. All you have to do is pick up a camera and start playing around, and if you're passionate about what you're doing, you can make it happen. So I ended up enrolling at OU and taking women's and gender studies courses because my passion was really social justice. And I knew that if I wanted to pick up a camera later in life and I wanted to make a film, I could. So fast forward a few years, and I'm in my junior year at OU, and I'm considering the difference between theoretical and practical knowledge. We've been studying feminism, we've been studying all of the different intersecting aspects of feminism, whether you're talking about the feminization of poverty or homosexuality or rape, sexual assault, abuse, education, all of these issues that women are struggling with, especially in the state of Oklahoma. I was really touched by studying, but I wanted to see it firsthand. I wanted to do something about it firsthand, and I felt a little isolated on campus because I didn't think that there was enough intersection between the community at large in Norman, Oklahoma, and the community of Oklahoma in general, and what was happening for the students on campus who were paying for their decent education. And I wanted to do something that made me feel like I was changing the world. So at the same time that I was thinking about this, encountered the research of Professor of Sociology, Dr. Susan Sharp, who's been conducting research at the University of Oklahoma on women in prison in Oklahoma for 10+ years. And I was really shocked by the statistics that I read in her research, one of them being that Oklahoma has the highest female incarceration rate per capita in the United States, and therefore in the world at large. And their overwhelming rates of abuse, domestic violence in their lives as children, sexual assault, drug abuse, and the fact that a majority of them are in prison for nonviolent drug-related crimes. And I thought to myself, I'm a women's and gender studies major, and I didn't know this before I read her research. The average person doesn't know this. So I decided to confront her and ask her if we could work together and collaborate on a documentary film. And I went about making the documentary film on my own. I had no crew, I had no budget. So I did everything bare bones, kind of just on the fly, asking for help, reaching out to my community. I asked the Women's and Gender Studies Department for help, the Center for Social Justice, also some close friends of mine who were art students. I had a friend who was a photographer, a friend who worked in the Film and Video Studies Equipment Lab who graciously lent us, without their permission, equipment to film the documentary with. And then I took out loans to pay for a computer and editing software, and I just started doing it. And the film was really successful for what it was. It was a student production. We were able to screen at several film festivals. We were able to go into the prisons actually with the help of my professor and meet with these women firsthand and talk with their children through another program called Girl Scouts Beyond Bars. And we did something very similar to what Ross Kaufman had done in Born into Brothels. He spoke with the children. He told the story of these children through their cameras. We were able to tell the stories of the women through the experiences of their children. So we really focused on how the impact of incarceration touches the children and the families and the community at large. And in the process, we were able to intersect so many different aspects of women's and gender studies, as well as different levels of the community, senators, people who work for the Department of Corrections, women in prison, their children, social activists who are working at the grassroots level for nonprofits, and then students, art students, and myself. And so I guess I'm on this panel because I was able to do something like that, and for some reason I'm supposed to share that with you. I like to say that I'm very thankful to be up here, and I want you to know that you can do anything you put your mind to if you really want it. As students and as individuals in the community at large, I know that you can do anything that you truly passionately care about, especially when it's for the better of others, for the good of others in the community. So I would open up the floor for questions later. If you have questions about the film itself, we have a website, and we have videos posted online. We're working on getting the movie uploaded to the internet for free access because so many people want to use it in their classes, and just kind of in the community at large, I've had people calling me from all over the country asking for copies of it, so I just want to put it out there. But media is a great tool for social change, and like Clemencia Rodriguez was saying, there are negatives and there are positives to using media as an avenue for social change. It can breed complacency. It can make you think that you're doing more than you're actually doing. It can separate you from your community as much as it can bring you together. So you have to be really wise about how you chart that course. But I would like to see media used in classrooms in the future for social change. I think that all social change begins with education. And I think that the first-hand experience I got as an undergraduate working on a film for class credit, working directly with women and learning about the issues that I was studying in class was the most valuable experience of my life. And I would hope that more undergrad programs would allow students to do things like that and produce things that will actually touch the community and bring people together. So that's me and that's my experience.
Wow. Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, that's a really tough act to follow. So I'm going to follow by talking about something that can be supportive for projects like yours, and that's earned media. Does anyone know what earned media is? Does anybody know? Can anybody conjecture or like make a guess about what they think earned media might be? Does anybody have an idea? All right, well, earned media is something that, first of all, you don't pay for it. It's basically jumping on an opportunity to get your message out because current events are either, something is happening that is very culturally relevant and the media jumps on it. So that is your opportunity to write your press releases, to get your sound bites out there. So, I mean, what a great project that you just talked about. That's fantastic. Like, what a great opportunity to write a press release, target your outlets that you would want to send that press release to, identify a couple of spokespeople who are good at being short to the point, pithy, on camera, and who can be poised and do those interviews. So I'm just going to outline a couple of very basic things that you need to remember when you're dealing with the media, especially when you're talking about earned media. So identify a couple of people to be your spokespeople. Come up with 2 to 3 short, very pithy statements that are actually just to the point of what you want to say, because understand that the average attention span is like a fruit fly. And use words that people are familiar with across the board. We tend to over-intellectualize things and make things complicated and argue things and debate, which is wonderful for us, but not for getting our point out to the masses. So when you're writing a press release, write it as if you were reading it in the paper. Write it as if it were a story. Because a lot of times journalists are lazy, and I hate to say that. If there are any journalists in the room, don't hate me. It's true. I mean, if you're a journalist, you're on deadline all the time, and you're looking for things to publish. It's really easy if you get someone, sending you a press release that is juicy and it's going to grab the reader's attention. You can just publish it and maybe even change the headline. So write your press release in story form. When you're thinking about your press release, if you're stating a problem, don't just complain without offering a solution. You can really lose your message that way. People will kind of tune out. And once you send out your press release, you're going to get calls from reporters, hopefully, right? So if you're dealing with people in print media, ask them to send you the questions in advance, and don't be afraid to do that. And sometimes you'll get pushback from those reporters. They're going to say, oh no, why don't you answer my questions now? Well, ask them when their deadline is and say, please send me your questions in advance. Research those questions to make sure you give them the best answers that you can. Now, if it's broadcast media, if it's on camera, chances are the camera's not going to be focused on the reporter asking you the questions. The camera's going to be focused on you, and they're not going to play the questions the reporter asked. They're going to air your responses. So answer the question that you wish the reporter was asking you. Doesn't matter. They're gonna try to throw you off, right? Yeah, don't let them do that. They're gonna try to kind of like disarm you because, you know, they're looking for conflict. Reality TV is all about drama and conflict. That's what they want. Don't let them do that. So answer the question that you wish they were asking you. And don't let reporters or don't let any member of the media pressure you into responding to an interview request like right away, like now. Just be like, I'm sorry, I can't do it right now. I can do it here, here, or here, but I cannot schedule you in the next hour. So that's kind of how they catch you off guard. Don't be afraid to say, I don't know. If they ask you a question that kind of throws you off guard, don't give them an answer that you're not sure of, because that will discredit you right away. So don't be afraid to say, I don't know. Say, you know what, I need to research that and I'll get back to you. There's no harm in that. And that's pretty much all I have. Like, for basic Earned Media 101. I just want to thank you guys for allowing me to participate in this panel. I feel very honored to be among these speakers. These are, you know, some basic tips that you can use right now that don't cost you any money, so that when you're doing projects like this, that you can, you know, you can write a press release and get it out there. I mean, oftentimes they will publish a story about something that you think that, oh, well, this is so small, like they wouldn't want to print this in paper or whatever. They'll publish stories. I mean, like, you know, you have to think we're on a 24-hour news cycle. They're constantly looking for material. So, you know, I'd say write a press release about everything that you think is important. And that's that. Thank you. Thanks.
Okay, so let me try to bring all these back together, and then we'll open it up to dialogue. And what I'm thinking I'm going to do is, let's think if every social movement could have its ideal media center. What would it look like? And I think the work in social movements and media, or media and social movements, is really complex. And so it has very different aspects to it, or types, lines of work that I think we should have clear in our minds. Even if we don't have the ideal media center, having kind of a vision of what the ideal would be kind of help us tailor our work and direct our resources. So this media center for a social movement should have a component of media people and communicators, like Melissa said, who are the experts in dealing with the mass media, right? Because the mass media are going, I mean, you want the mass media to cover your social movement. And so you need to know the kind of bait that the mass media are going to grab into. And the mass media grab into spectacle, drama, sound bites, period. Social justice, it doesn't matter. So for example, I remember some years ago when I was living in Nicaragua, and I was working with some women's organizations and they were trying to set up or mobilize people around impunity in rape cases. And we decided, okay, we're not going to have the usual march and demonstration. We're going to do something really spectacular. And I don't know who came up with this idea and actually who made it happen. But we had built a like 2-story tall or high image of a rapist that was paraded throughout the whole city and then burned in a huge fire of fire. That absolutely brought all the media attention because it was so spectacular and dramatic, and it never happened before in the city, that they couldn't care less about, you know, rape or domestic abuse or violence against women, but the drama was what brought media in. But you can't allow the mainstream media to take over all your media work. You need to develop your own media, to do your own coverage, and to kind of keep your people informed and do your networking and all that. So that's kind of another type of media work, which is not the people in charge of dealing with the mass media, but is the people in charge of your own blogs and your own internet and your own radio and your own videos and your own everything. If, your own Twitter, your own Facebook, your own cell phone, texting, etc. And that allows you to do your own coverage, also to produce counter information, which is very important, and to network among your people. So that's kind of line of work number 2. And then there is line of work number 3, which I think here is where Amina's work and Zermarie's work would belong or fit, which is what I call expressive media. So these are media that are not, are less instrumental, are more media to empower people, to help people find their own voice, to bring these voices that we never see in the public sphere, make it to the public sphere. And here is where you need people to work with communities, media people, to work with communities, allowing communities to appropriate media technologies for their own agendas, for their own voice, for their own expression. That's why I tend to call it expressive media. And all 3, I think, are very important lines of work. Mainstream media, alternative media, and expressive media. So, okay, I'm going to leave it there to allow plenty of time for your questions, comments, experiences, contributions.